The Huawei Matebooks have always been some of my favorite work laptops out there, and with the Matebook 14S, it gets better. But there's one killer issue: the chip. But first, the good. Its design is honestly pretty nice. Some might say it's rather similar to the MacBooks, which it clearly draws inspiration from, but it still looks good on its own, and I can't really fault it for its design style. It's got a nice metallic finish all around, and well, you can judge for yourself whether you like it. But the key part of this design that I love the most is absolutely the screen. In my review of the previous generation MacBook D14, the hands down favorite feature for me was the wonderful 3x2 display, and thankfully it returns here. It's a glossy display that's got an aspect ratio that I can't overstate the usefulness of. It's tall and perfect for text documents, which is what this laptop was built for, and for things like web pages, YouTube videos, and overall just more practical stuff, it makes so much sense. Not to mention, it also has excellent contrast, colors, and viewing angles, with HDR400 support going up to 400 nits with 10-bit color on this panel. And it's also touch sensitive, super useful for easily scrolling and browsing web pages and getting work done. It's also a 2560 by 1080 display, and at 14.3 inches gives a more than satisfactory 243 pixels per inch, which is nice, sharp, and absolutely clear. It can also be a 90Hz screen depending on the option that you spec when you buy and order your MacBook 14S. And now I absolutely love the screen, and of course it doesn't exactly beat my 16-inch MacBook Pro's display. It's also on a much cheaper laptop, and for people who are just looking to get basic work done on text documents, web pages, and stuff like that, it will be an absolute joy to use. But you can't only type on the screen. The keyboard and trackpad also hold up wonderfully in a kind of cohesive experience. The keyboard has very little DAC flex, a good standard layout, and it has a good amount of travel to it too. It's got a pretty crisp actuation, and the bottom out is actually pretty nice and reasonably unspongy. With overall resistance not being too light or too stiff, it feels very balanced and in general should be satisfactory of a keyboard for most people out there. The trackpad is quite sizable and glass as well, which is nice, and its tracking is about as accurate as it gets when it comes to Windows laptops. The clicks are my only issue. It does feel a little too stiff sometimes, and because it's not like a separated click from the trackpad, you might have some problems finding exactly where is the optimum place to click on it. Battery life on this laptop is also respectable, with a 60-watt-hour battery in it, allowing for a good 6 hours of intensive use in my testing. It could be bigger for sure, in my opinion. They could max it out. For a laptop of this caliber and this kind, it's kind of the best solution to things, but it is definitely adequate. If you need to plug it in for more power or for a quick little charge, it does so via any one of its two USB-C ports. It's got quite healthy I/O to be fair, and it also does support quick charging, fast charging. Apart from the USB-C, you have a USB Type-A port on the right for easy thumb drive or mouse connection, which is nice, and an HDMI port so you can quickly plug it into a screen or a projector for presentations or just for more effective work. And you also get a headphone jack. Speaking of work, you probably need to handle a bunch of calls if you are working on a laptop like this, and while the webcam looks acceptable, it's far from awesome. It's only 720p and definitely feels a little soft for my tastes, but it's definitely usable, though the fact that it's on the screen instead of hidden in the keyboard does mean you might want to get a webcam cover for privacy, because like the previous MacBook D14 had a little pop-up webcam that was hidden in the keyboard. It's quite nice, though not very practical. The speakers are in a similar spot. It's acceptable without being really earth-shatteringly good, just like the webcam. It gets pretty loud with no distortion that's notable, has a reasonable amount of detail and warmth to it, but it's miles away from the MacBooks of the world, but that's okay. You will still have a decent experience for watching YouTube videos in a quiet environment. Just don't expect it to be really audible in a noisy place. Speaking of noise, I'm pleasantly surprised to hear that, well, not hear much at all. It stays relatively quiet in most of the tasks you might want to do on this, like watching 4K video or doing general heavy web browsing. Of course, if you want to do crazier stuff like editing footage on here, well, for one, it's not going to produce great results, and another, it's going to produce a lot of heat and fan noise, so it's not really meant for those intensive tasks. Sure, if you want to open up Lightroom or Photoshop and occasionally edit a photo because you want to do a thumbnail or you want to do an Instagram post, it's going to do the job. But for anything more intensive than that, you're going to have to look elsewhere. Which leads me to the biggest issue of the Huawei Matebook 14S, and in fact the rest of Huawei's laptop lineup, the processors they have in use. They are unfortunately affirmatively last-gen Intel processors with a selection of i3, i5s, and i7 CPUs featuring Intel's Xe integrated graphics in play here. These are 11th gen chips, which is old, especially if you consider the fact that the CPU companies of the world have been consistently leapfrogging each other in the last couple of years. These chips definitely show their age. I mean, 12th gen has been out for such a long time at this point, so why hasn't Huawei updated their laptops to the newer processors? Perhaps it's the trade embargoes that are limiting the accessibility to these newer 12th gen or even AMD chips. Perhaps it's Huawei holding out for 13th gen or AMD Ryzen 7000 series before bothering to do an update, or perhaps Huawei is working on their own chips, their own OS, since they are supposed to kind of be the counterweight for China to the tech giants of America. Either way, these older CPUs mean that it's really a hard product to recommend for most people, since for the same price you can often get a 12th gen or AMD Ryzen 5 6000 series CPU laptop with similar features, although with not as nice of a screen. If you are just watching videos and doing general work, it's actually true that these CPUs should be more than enough, and for people who are doing very minimal stuff and aren't the most intense power users out there, this laptop is actually really quite nice. In fact, the screen, I would say, it's one of the big attractions. But the thing about the new gen processors is not just about performance, it's also about battery life. And in a laptop, that is super important for getting work done, because you don't want to have to be rushing for a charger every time you need to rush a bit of work. So in conclusion then, should you buy the Huawei Matebook 14S? Well, it's far from a bad laptop or a bad choice, but only if you don't plan to do a lot of intensive tasks like heavy multitasking or running fancy software. For the average Joe that's just typing in Microsoft Word and working away in Excel, it's more than enough, and it will really be a good laptop experience still for a lot of people because it's got excellent features like its great build quality, keyboard and screen. But that old processor might be a heavy drawback for some, especially those people who are very concerned about battery life, since newer laptops with newer processors should run at higher performance levels while having better battery life and better efficiency, because 12th gen and AMD Ryzen 5000 series laptop chips, for that matter, is a big jump over Intel 11th gen laptop chips. So definitely keep it in your short list, but do keep the drawbacks in mind when making a decision, because while there are plenty of pros, because of its age, there are plenty of cons as well. And with that, thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you like, subscribe, all that good stuff. I'll see you guys in the next video, and if you watched this point, all love to you, and comments, what's up, Matebook? I don't know, that's kind of lame, but whatever. Bye. Questions in the Discord, in the comments. Bye.